World War II was a pivotal event that reshaped the global landscape. It involved a struggle for power between the Axis and Allied forces. At the heart of it, the Nazis, led by Adolf Hitler, sought to establish a new world order. Their ideology was rooted in racial supremacy and totalitarian control. The Allied victory in 1945 marked the end of Nazi ambitions. Yet the possibility of a Nazi victory is a haunting scenario. What if the Axis powers had triumphed? How would life be different today? This essay delves into an alternate history where the Nazis emerged victorious. It examines the potential impact on global governance, education, technology, and resistance efforts. Imagining such a world requires piecing together historical plans and speculative literature. Understanding this alternate history can offer insights into the importance of the choices made during World War II. It reminds us of the potential consequences of unchecked totalitarian regimes. A Nazi victory would have ushered in a new era of authoritarian rule. The world would be dominated by a hierarchical system based on racial ideology. Europe would likely be reorganized into territories governed by Nazi officials. Non-Aryan populations would face severe repression. The concept of Lebensraum, or living space, would drive expansionist policies. It would result in the displacement and extermination of millions. Authoritarian regimes would replace democratic institutions. Puppet governments would be installed in occupied regions. The Nazis planned to establish a greater Germanic Reich. This empire would be ruled with an iron fist, suppressing dissent and diversity. In this world, alliances would be formed based on racial hierarchies. The Axis powers, including Japan and Italy, would have their spheres of influence. The United States, if not defeated, would likely be isolated. It would face immense pressure to conform to Axis terms. International relations would be dictated by power and fear. The global economy would be centrally controlled. Resources would be exploited to benefit the Nazi regime. It paints a picture of a society where freedom and diversity are sacrificed for totalitarian control. Education under Nazi rule would be a tool for indoctrination. The curriculum would be designed to instill loyalty to the regime. It would emphasize racial purity and obedience to authority. Subjects like history would be rewritten to glorify the Aryan race. Scientific education would focus on eugenics and militarization. The aim would be to produce a generation of devoted followers. Nazi youth organizations would play a crucial role. The Hitler Youth and League of German Girls would indoctrinate children from a young age. Activities would include military training and ideological education. Critical thinking and creativity would be discouraged. This would ensure that future generations remain loyal to the regime. Higher education would also be affected. Universities would prioritize fields that align with Nazi goals. Research in areas like genetics and warfare would be heavily funded. Academic freedom would be stifled. Professors and students who opposed the regime would face severe consequences. The suppression of diverse perspectives would hinder cultural and scientific progress. Instead, it would be trapped in a cycle of indoctrination and control. Technological progress under the Nazi regime would take a different path. The focus would be on advancements that support military and ideological goals. Rocketry and nuclear technology would likely see significant investment. The Nazis had already made strides in these areas during the war. A victory would have accelerated these developments. The V2 rocket program was a precursor to modern space exploration. In this alternate history, the Nazis might have been the first to reach space. Their achievements, however, would be driven by militaristic intentions. Space exploration would serve as a demonstration of power. Technological innovation would be constrained by ideology. Projects that did not align with Nazi goals would be disregarded. This would lead to a stagnation in fields like medicine and information technology. The regime's emphasis on eugenics would drive unethical experiments. The potential for progress in areas like communication and healthcare would be limited. The focus on militarization would overshadow the potential for peaceful innovation. Despite the oppressive Nazi regime, resistance movements would emerge. These movements would be crucial in challenging the totalitarian control. Underground networks would form across occupied territories. They would include a diverse group of dissidents, from former soldiers to civilian activists. Their objectives would range from sabotage to spreading counter-propaganda. The resistance would likely face immense challenges. The Nazis were known for their brutal suppression of dissent, yet the determination of these groups would be unwavering. They would find innovative ways to communicate and organize. Technology, though limited, would be used to their advantage. Radio broadcasts and pamphlets would be key tools for spreading information. International support for resistance movements would be limited. However, sympathetic nations might provide covert assistance. This support would be crucial for sustaining morale and resources. Resistance efforts would be a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Their stories would become a part of the cultural heritage, reminding society of the importance of standing against tyranny. Propaganda would be a cornerstone of the Nazi regime's strategy. It would be used to maintain control and influence public opinion. The regime was already adept at using media to promote its ideology. A victory would have expanded its reach. Every aspect of life would be saturated with Nazi ideology. From newspapers to films, the message would be consistent and relentless. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, would play a central role. His strategies would evolve to adapt to the new global context. The regime would employ advanced techniques to manipulate information. It would create an environment where dissenting voices are drowned out. The narrative would glorify the Aryan race and demonize perceived enemies. Education and media would work in tandem to reinforce propaganda. Schools would teach a version of history that aligns with Nazi beliefs. Artistic expression would be closely monitored. Any form of art or literature that contradicts the regime's message would be censored. The effectiveness of propaganda would be evident in the regime's ability to maintain control. This manipulation of information would be a powerful tool for sustaining the regime's dominance. A Nazi victory would lead to significant cultural shifts. The regime's emphasis on Aryan superiority would shape cultural norms. Art and music would reflect Nazi values. Classical styles that align with the regime's ideals would be promoted. Works by Jewish and other marginalized artists would be banned. This would result in a cultural landscape devoid of diversity. Language would also be influenced by Nazi ideology. The regime would promote the use of German as a unifying language. Other languages and dialects would be suppressed. This linguistic homogenization would be part of a broader effort to create a cohesive cultural identity. Sports and entertainment would serve as tools for propaganda. Athletic events would emphasize physical prowess and racial purity. The Nazis had already demonstrated this during the 1936 Berlin Olympics. In this world, international competitions would become showcases of Aryan strength. Entertainment, including films and theater, would promote Nazi ideals. The suppression of diverse perspectives would stifle creativity and innovation. The world would lose the richness that comes from cultural exchange. The political landscape of a Nazi-dominated world would be unrecognizable. Democracies would be replaced by authoritarian regimes. The principles of freedom and equality would be abandoned. This transformation would have far-reaching consequences. It would alter the course of history and shape the future of global politics. The regime's influence would extend beyond its borders. Allied nations would be forced to adapt to the new world order. Some might resist, while others would capitulate. The political alliances of the 20th century would dissolve. In their place, new pacts would be formed based on Nazi ideologies. This shift would create a precarious balance of power. The impact on international relations would be profound. The concept of sovereignty would be redefined. Nations would be subjugated to Nazi interests. This would undermine efforts to maintain peace and cooperation. The long-term effects of these political transformations would be dire. The world would be locked in a cycle of conflict and oppression. In imagining a world where the Nazis won World War II, we uncover a dystopian reality. The global landscape would be shaped by authoritarian rule and racial ideology. Education would serve as a tool for indoctrination. Technological advancements would prioritize militarization over progress. Resistance movements, though suppressed, would endure as symbols of hope. Propaganda would permeate every aspect of life, maintaining the regime's control. cultural and political shifts would create a homogeneous and oppressive society. This alternate history serves as a stark reminder of the importance of the choices made during the war. It underscores the need to protect democratic values and human rights. Understanding this possibility emphasizes the significance of resisting totalitarianism and embracing a future of hope and unity.